Thanks to Misplay for sponsoring today's video. More on them in just a minute. Phrogging is the term used when referring to someone who sneaks into and starts living in someone else's home without their knowledge or permission. Imagine one day you wake up to pour your morning Cheerios, you look at the bag and think, wasn't there more cereal in here yesterday? Your milk carton maybe feels just a little bit lighter than usual. You go to sit down on the couch with your Cheerios and you think, I don't remember leaving the remote there. You're on your laptop in your office and you swear you hear a little bump from your ceiling. Many people in these situations start to believe that they're going crazy, or maybe they have a raccoon in their house, or rats, or some people even start to fear that their home is haunted. But the reality is much more terrifying. In these situations, when you go to bed at night, someone emerges from the closet, the crawl space, or even from the inside the walls of your home, the place you're supposed to feel the safest, and they creep around while you're in bed. Before you wake up in the morning, they are hidden again, like a spider trying to avoid getting squished. There's someone in your house, and they have been living in your walls for weeks. Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about phrogging. Yes, it's pronounced phrogging, like the animal frog, except it is spelled with a PH, not an F. Recently I asked you guys what kind of videos you want to see, and I got a few suggestions for this, and honestly I really liked the idea because I never really dived into this. So today we are going to talk about 3 different phrogging cases and the absolute terrifying things that happened to the poor victims of these cases. This video is supported by a sponsor, so I'm going to roll to the ad read, but I'll be right back with you guys. So you guys know by now that I play a lot of mobile games. I personally like relaxing, low stakes mobile games that I can play on breaks from making videos or in the evenings while I'm watching Netflix. But if you aren't earning gift cards while you play your mobile games, literally, what are you even doing? Today's sponsor, Misplay, allows you to play really fun, really engaging mobile games. And while you're playing them, you earn points towards gift cards at the same time. Misplay is a loyalty app for gamers. Whether you're looking for a little help covering your Amazon cart, your daily coffee, or your Fortnite battle pass, with Misplay, you can earn rewards simply by discovering and playing mobile games. Play their variety of puzzle, strategy, adventure, word games, whatever type of games you like through the Misplay app, and earn rewards towards real gift cards. Now think about this for a second. Misplay users to date have redeemed over $100 million in gift cards. I can't even fathom that amount of money, but the fact that Misplay has doled out that many rewards to players is just like so amazing to me. I am still playing Triple Tile. Yes, just in case you guys wanted to know from the last time, I am now on level 430. But just a couple days ago, I started playing this restaurant simulation game. It's called Chef and Friends through Misplay. I am already so hooked on it. I cannot wait to go back to it. Like, I can't wait to finish filming so I can go back to that game. Visit misplay.com/Hannah or use the link in the description right below this video to download Misplay for free. You will get 200 bonus points just for signing up today. But here's a little secret for some extra points. If you guys use my code, which is Hannah in all caps 100, like I'm showing you on the screen right now, and you will get an additional 100 free points, which will help towards redeeming your first gift card. You can see the description below this video for all the details. The first case that we're talking about today is from You Know It Joe, or Joe Cummings. This phrogging case is extra fascinating to me because Joe had suspected something weird going on in his home, so he set up cameras and he was able to catch his Phrogger in the act. So like I said, this is a man named Joe Cummings who lived in New York in 2009. Joe posted a 5-minute YouTube video that went viral at the time. It has over 21 million views. And he explains at the beginning of the video that he was noticing that food was missing from his kitchen. Like, he could have sworn he had more of something, and then it just seems to like disappear, and he knew for a fact that it wasn't him eating it. The only other culprit could be his girlfriend, so he kept asking his girlfriend if she was the one that was like sneaking his food. I don't think she lived with him at the time, so I think he was suspecting that just when she came over, she was randomly stealing his food. So Joe is so sure that his girlfriend is lying to him and fully believes that she's doing it and just won't tell him. So Joe decides he wants to catch her in the act. So he sets up a camera, a night vision camera, in his kitchen overnight because he claims that he wants to catch his girlfriend getting up in the middle of the night to go to the kitchen and eat his food. What he found when he reviewed this footage was nothing short of terrifying. Joe, upon reviewing the footage, realized that it was not his girlfriend eating his food, but rather a woman was emerging out of his crawl space at night. On the footage, you see the woman come down from her little hiding place, help herself to some food and Joe's drinks, and then she just goes to sit on the couch and just watches a little TV, helps herself, if you will. But all that happened after she pees in Joe's sink. If you think about it, this makes sense. Wherever she was hiding, there wasn't a toilet. And if she snuck out at night and used Joe's toilet, A, she wouldn't be able to flush because she would risk waking Joe up. And if she didn't flush, that would be obviously a huge red flag. So yes, she was using Joe's sink to pee. And no, I don't know where she was going, number two. And frankly, I don't care to know. So in the video, she is going back to the kitchen to get more food and starts to eat more food when she hears a noise and believes Joe is coming out of his room, which he is. So she goes and just like lunges towards the couch and hides. Joe gets up. He's obviously just getting a glass of water or something. And then he goes back to bed. And the woman eventually, she waits a while, but she comes back out. Joe ends the video showing her going back up to her crawl space. Joe says that she was living there for 2 weeks before he set this camera up. And when he did figure out what was going on, he of course called the police. They came and arrested the woman. But 2 weeks Joe was living with this unknown guest. Now, this is a really, really tricky one because there's not actually legitimate proof that this ever really happened to Joe. A lot of people question the validity of his story, and a lot of people believe that it's a hoax. First of all, the culprit is never named, and if she was arrested, it probably would have been in the news. Joe is also an actor, like he full on has an IMDb page, so a lot of people believe that that is reason that he is not only more creative than the average Joe, his name's Joe, the average person, but he would also therefore then be able to make this more convincing since he was a professional actor. And the video got 21 million views as of filming this. So was he just promoting himself, like trying to get his name out there more as an actor? On the other hand, though, he didn't post this on his main acting channel. He posted this on a channel called You Know It Joe, and his main channel with a little over 1,000 subscribers, I think it was, is Joe Cummings, and it's like his acting channel. It's like clearly videos that he shows potential agencies that might hire him. So if he was doing this to promote himself, why didn't he put it on his main channel where then potential employers would be able to see that, like, wow, look at how he was such a good actor that he convinced this many people of this fabricated story. You know what I mean? It's possible that if this was a hoax, Joe was inspired by a real story out of Japan. A 58-year-old woman out of Japan, her name was Tatsuko Horikawa. She She was caught frogging in somebody else's house for an entire year before she got caught. In fact, when you look up that news story, Joe's footage almost always comes up in most sources. A lot of people attribute Joe's footage to being Tatsuko when it's not her. That was a completely unrelated case. And as far as I know, I couldn't find a picture of Tatsuko or anything identifying her. All I could find was that her name, confirming that it was a true story. So to be fair, this has not been confirmed either way. You guys know me, I'm skeptical. I usually lean on the side of it being a hoax, especially when it comes to viral videos. And I do kind of wonder why Joe's story, if true, didn't make it into any legitimate news sources. The couple articles I could find about it were, again, pretty unreliable sources and never named the name of the woman. And I'm not sure why that would be something to keep private when you're publicly arrested in New York City. But shout out to the funniest comment I have ever seen, because somebody recently posted on Joe's video from like over a decade ago, this Addison had something to say about this. She says, "I can't believe after 14 years, people still believe this was real, squinty laugh face, LOL. Get some research on this, you brainwashed dummies. Heart." Addison, thank you so much, Addison. Wow, you're so helpful. I'm just so glad there's people like you contributing to the internet and to society in this way. Like, honestly, you are doing God's work. Like, we couldn't do this without you. Okay, that was our shortest story, just to kind of kick things off, as I really love a good found footage CCTV story. The next two stories are not only a little longer, but they are both definitely true and have 100% been confirmed. The first one we're talking about is Daniel LaPlante. Daniel LaPlante may be the most infamous case of frogging. Daniel LaPlante did not have a great start in life. He was born on May 15, 1970, and his childhood was absolutely awful from day one. He was born and raised in Townsend, Massachusetts, and he was sexually and psychologically abused by not only his father, but allegedly his stepfather and allegedly his psychiatrist. Those were the main ones, but it is likely there was even more. For some reason, Daniel was just a victim of a lot of older men in his life that he was supposed to be able to trust. It is said that his father was allegedly the worst of his abusers. He's the one that was the most consistent and the worst about it, both sexually, psychologically, and physically. But when Daniel was a teen and his psychiatrist started doing this, it just like makes an extra heavy pit in my stomach. For some reason, like, not that it's any worse or better than your father, but just the fact that a psychiatrist is a professional who you're trusting, that you're supposed, like everybody thinks like their therapist is the person that they can trust the most in the world, right? Like, they are supposed to be a very safe person. Like, that's the whole point. And the fact that he went into a psychiatrist's office and the psychiatrist allegedly took advantage of him in this way is just so unbelievably sickening to me. And I do, in spite of what Daniel goes on to do, I do feel for baby Daniel. I feel for childhood Daniel, because he was a victim at that time. But if that wasn't all bad enough, Daniel couldn't even find any solace at school with his classmates. Nobody liked him. He didn't fit in well at school. He didn't have a lot of friends. All his classmates described him as creepy and weird. They got a violent vibe from him. He also just did not have good hygiene whatsoever. So he looked kind of gross and smelled. He was then diagnosed with dyslexia as well as ADHD. However, I believe it was by the psychiatrist who was taking advantage of him and hurting him frequently. So, I mean, I guess take that with a grain of salt. By the time he was a young teenager, Daniel's favorite pastime in the world was breaking into people's houses in his neighborhood and in the surrounding areas and stealing things. It was all small-time robberies. It wasn't usually a lot of stuff. He usually enjoyed taking just a couple things and getting out without anybody really noticing. But he did get bored of this also very quickly, and this is kind of where his first escalation suspicion starts. So slowly, instead of just taking something from a home he broke into, he would then leave something in its place. And then he started moving things in people's homes. He liked to rearrange stuff, but in subtle ways, like not very obvious ways. And he was doing this because it was entertaining to him to play mind games on his victims. Because that way, when they woke up in the morning, they didn't know they had been robbed. And like, they just look around and the couch is a few inches off. Stuff like that. He really enjoyed knowing that he was probably making people feel like they were going crazy or being haunted or something. I'm sure it was a power trip thing. Then in 1986, Daniel was 16 years old and he escalates again. Daniel grew this like really big interest in a family in the local area in Townsend. This was a widowed dad. The dad's name was Frank Bowen, and he had two daughters, 15-year-old Tina Bowen and 9-year-old Karen Bowen. Daniel kind of grew obsessed with Tina, the teenage girl, and he had gotten their phone number from, allegedly, we don't know for sure, but possibly from a house that he had broken into. He found their phone number and he started calling the girls and talking to Tina and Karen on the phone and kind of charmed them. But he didn't tell them who he was, and he catfished. He made up a story about how he got their phone number, and then he told Tina that he was blonde, that he was athletic, that he was smart and tall and handsome, even though by many people's definitions, he was the exact opposite of all of those things. So after a few of these phone conversations, Tina agreed to go out on a date with Daniel. Of course, then when Tina met Daniel in person, she was very confused and realized, of course, right off the bat that he was not who he described himself as. She did proceed with the date, and I'm sure she just felt pressured to be polite. I mean, you're a 15-year-old girl and you agreed to go on a date with this guy who mysteriously got your phone number. Like, yeah, it would just be kind of weird, and she probably just felt like she had to at that point. But about an hour into it, they went to the local fair, and about an hour in, Tina made up an excuse to get out of it, and she went home. For Tina, it seemed like that was that. She thought she had seen the last of Daniel. So fast forward a little while later, Tina and her sister Karen, remember Karen was the 9-year-old little sister, they wanted to contact their dead mother. Remember I said that their father Frank was widowed? Well, their mother really tragically passed away from cancer, and the two girls had a Ouija board, and they thought that it would be a good idea to kind of hold a seance and see if they could get in contact with their late mother. They just wanted to talk to her. And just for the record, I don't judge or blame these two young girls for wanting to do this whatsoever. But after they were done playing with the Ouija board, the two girls went to bed. And weirdly, right after this whole seance, they start hearing tapping on the walls. It sounded like it was coming from inside of the walls. They got really excited at first. They thought that this meant that the seance worked, and they started asking what they thought was a spirit questions. And the spirit was answering them in the form of knocks on the wall. And the knocking continued, though, night after night. And then objects around the house started going missing. Furniture started moving. The girls thought that it was their mom at first, but a few weeks later, they really started to become very scared as they realized that this was some sort of evil entity. Like, this thing was taking their food, moving their stuff, taking their stuff, and then kind of taunting them through the walls. They were scared that they summoned a demon from the Ouija board, which, if you were in that position, wouldn't you think the same thing? Like, some unseen thing is messing with you every single day, and it started right after you messed with the Ouija board. Like, even the most skeptical non-believer in the world would be freaked out by that. When the girls tried to tell Frank, their dad, about all this weird stuff happening, Frank reacted like a stereotypical sitcom dad and was like, "You silly girls." He chalked it up to grief and thought that the girls were just doing this for attention, assuming that the grief of losing their mother was making them act out. In January of 1987, Tina and Karen were still hearing the knocking. It was completely normal for them at this point, but this time they heard that the sound was coming from what sounded like the basement rather than from inside the walls. So the girls got really brave. They got some kitchen knives from the kitchen, and they decided that together they were going to go down to the basement and see if they could confront or find whatever kind of demon thing was haunting them. On the walls of the basement was a message that appeared to have been written in blood. It said, "I am in your room. Come and find me." Tina and Karen run out of the house to the neighbor's house, terrified out of their minds, as anyone would be. When their dad found out, he continued to gaslight them, and this time just sent them to counseling, again believing that they were playing pranks on each other or like hyping each other up, or again just doing this for attention. A few weeks later, the girls go into Tina's room and find yet another message in what looks like blood. This time it said, "I'm back. Find me if you can." Now, the sources kind of vary on how their dad finally believed them, but he eventually did. One source I said read that they were all at a neighbor's house together and something was written on the walls while they were gone and some stuff was moved while they were gone. And so that's when dad realized that it couldn't have been the girls. So something like that happened, because when dad came back and went into Tina's room, he found yet another message written on the walls. And this time it said, "Marry me." So creepy. So then when Frank turns around and looks at the other side of the room, apparently Daniel was standing there. Other sources said that dad started looking through the house and found Daniel hiding in Tina's closet. Now, yet again, sources vary. Some sources say that he was dressed in face paint, in a mask, and that he was wearing like an indigenous person, a Native American style jacket. But then another source I read said that he was wearing Frank's late wife's clothes, like one of her dresses and a wig and her makeup. I'm not positive which one was true, because if he was dressed like their late mother, it's clear that he was gonna like surprise the two girls. Like the plan was to pop out when the girls came into the room and be dressed like their late mother, either to just scare the crap out of them or to make them think that their mother's ghost was in the room with them. We don't know. He was just being a freak. But when Frank found him instead, Daniel panicked because that was not part of his plan. He was not expecting the girl's dad to be there. And no matter what story was true about what he was wearing, Daniel was holding a hatchet in one hand. Because he had a weapon in his hand, he was able to force Frank, Karen, and Tina into one of the bedrooms, and he kept them in one of the bedrooms for a while. However, Tina was able to escape through one of the windows in the bedrooms, and she ran to a neighbor's house and they called the police. By the time the police arrived, though, Daniel had vanished. The police started investigating the house, and I am very, very happy to report that at least the messages on the walls were not in fact written in blood. It was ketchup. They then figured out that there was a hidden crawl space behind a cupboard in Tina's room, which led to the inside of the walls of the Bowens house. Daniel had been there this entire time. I'm sure most of you guys saw that coming, but he was not only frogging in their house, but he was inside the walls. And they found that this little crawl space, this hidden crawl space that they didn't know about, led to like tunnels within their house's walls. So he could travel behind the walls in their house from room to room. And he heard them doing that seance, and that's when he started pretending to be the ghost of their dead mother, and it was just perfect timing for Daniel. Police open the crawl space, and sure enough, they find Daniel curled up inside trying to hide. That explains why he had seemingly vanished when police arrived. What's even worse is that the police also found tiny little peepholes throughout the house. So Daniel was not only living in there and freaking out the family, messing with Tina and Karen, making them feel like they were going crazy or that they had summoned a demon, but he was also peeping on them, especially Tina, because he was obsessed with Tina and he was mad at her for rejecting him. So Daniel is arrested. Daniel is a minor though, so he goes to juvenile detention, but he was granted bail. He didn't do anything violent, so that doesn't really surprise me. So he was granted bail and he was released in October 1987. By November though, he was already back to his old ways, back to breaking into houses and robbing them. This time though, in November of 1987, he stole some handguns from somebody's house. Now, just a warning, everything we've talked about up until this point has been creepy, but Daniel escalates from like 0 to 100 very quickly, and this story very sadly ends in a horrific murder. So just prepare yourself for that, or skip if you don't want to hear it. On December 1st, 1987, Daniel broke into a house that had 33-year-old pregnant woman Priscilla Gustafson and her 5-year-old son William inside. It was only Priscilla and William in the house when he broke in. Priscilla did have a husband, but he was at work. This was in the middle of the day. And he was confident that he could get in and out of this house with no issues, because not only was he a master break and enterer by this point, but Daniel had broken into Priscilla's house a couple weeks before on November 16th. So he was just doing it again. But he didn't think anybody was going to be home. He didn't expect Priscilla to be home with any of the kids. William had an older sister, 7-year-old Abigail, who is really, really tragically going to be a victim as well, but she wasn't home when he broke in. She was at school, on her way home from school. Nobody understands why, but Daniel escalates so quickly. He went from just torturing people psychologically, messing with them, taking a thrill out of feeling that all that power from making them feel like they're going crazy. And then he just decides that he has to murder this almost entire family. First, he, of course, ties up Priscilla and he proceeds to rape her. He's a 17-year-old guy and he a 33-year-old pregnant woman. And then with that handgun that he stole from a previous house, he shot Priscilla twice in the head at point blank range. He just left her laying face down on her bed. I think he had forced William into the closet, the 5-year-old boy, but he took him out of the closet and then proceeded to drown him in a bathtub in the upstairs bathroom. He was going to leave, but then poor little Abigail, 7-year-old Abigail, came home from the bus from school, and she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she was minutes away from being okay, but she came home, and for whatever reason, Daniel felt like he had to do the same to her, so he killed her in the same way that he killed her little brother William, but except in a different bathroom downstairs. Daniel fled the scene, and Priscilla's husband came home, could not find her, and then found her in the state that she was in their bedroom, which, I mean, trauma for life, but thankfully her husband did leave before looking for the children. He had kind of like his instincts already told him what happened to the children. I think he kind of deep down knew, and he said that he was afraid he was going to find them that way, so he didn't look because he wouldn't be able to take it. So thankfully he was spared from seeing his freaking children like that. But unfortunately, he did see his wife like that. So a manhunt, of course, ensues for Daniel. They are pretty sure that that is who did this. I mean, he was the one that was breaking into people's houses all the time, and he had just been arrested for hiding in this family's house. He wasn't found for 48 hours. He was trying to hide in a big dumpster, and the police found him hiding there, and he was, of course, arrested. I'm not going to go into the details of the evidence because it's just kind of like boring law talk that's like more intricate. It's above my pay grade, but I will say, like, rest assured, there was a lot of forensic evidence against Daniel, the least of which was that they found one of Abigail's hairs on his sock, but the bullets also matched up to the gun he had. They found his DNA on Priscilla's bed, if you know what I mean. There was also a lot of fiber evidence linking him to the crime. Like, it was very clear that he did this. He decided to go to trial, and he was found guilty and given 3 consecutive life sentences for the murders, as he should. He has tried over the years to appeal this because he was a minor when this happened, and he and his lawyers like to argue that it is like unethical, basically, to never allow a person who committed the crimes when they were a minor to be granted parole in any form. I'm really torn on this. Like, I do believe that if you were a kid when you committed a really bad crime, like, you should be given some sort of chance at rehabilitation. But I still think he's responsible for his actions. And I think what he did was heinous. And I think about those kids in that picture of that mom with her two little just precious sweet baby angels in that picture, and I just look at that picture and I'm like, Daniel, sorry, you deserve to be locked up for the rest of your life. My understanding, though, is that because he was a minor, he will be given a parole hearing after 45 years served, which would be about around the year 2032. The other thing that really nailed it for me is that Daniel never showed any signs of remorse. Not when it happened. They tried to analyze him and talk to him, and he never showed any signs that he was sorry for what he did or that he had any real regret. And even to this day, when he was older, as late as 2017, he still wasn't showing signs of remorse. And look at how Daniel looks now. Like, I cannot get over how different he looks from when he was a kid. Like, I just can't with this. I don't know why my brain cannot register this, but he just, like, usually for some reason, I imagined him looking like slightly still like he did as a teenager, but now he looks like an average mid-white man. Anyway, I'm glad he's behind bars. I don't think, even if he is given a parole hearing, I don't think he's going to get parole. I think what he did was way too violent. I think what he did was just so escalating. Like, how quickly he escalated probably scares me the most, is that he wasn't like harming people or doing small violent things before, as far as I really know. And so the fact that he just went from that to just like triple homicide is just, especially of small children, I don't know. In my very unexpert opinion, I'm glad he's going to be behind bars. I certainly wouldn't want him to get out. Okay, that was our very long middle story. The last third story of Phrogging today is Ezekiel Zayas. This is definitely one of the more disturbing modern cases of Phrogging. The average Phrogging case, which it does happen semi-regularly, the average Phrogging perpetrator, or Phrogger, I guess we could just call them, is not somebody who intends to harm the family, right? We don't hear about those as much. The bigger cases are the ones where they do intend to harm the family, but it's a lot of the times the intruder really just wants a place to live without having to pay rent, and they don't want to be homeless, and so they're just like camping out in somebody's house. That doesn't make it right by any means, but a lot of the times they don't have violent intentions, or they don't even want to be found at all. They just want to stay there for a few days or a few weeks, and then they want to get out and go to the next house without you even knowing that they were there. But the same can't be said for this case, and I have to tell you all that this case haunts not only my dreams, but my nightmares. Ezekiel Zayas was a man from Bridgeport, Connecticut. He was in his mid-20s, and he was reported as a missing person in July of 2019 by his family. Ezekiel's mother soon found out that he had made it all the way from Connecticut to Hawaii to Honolulu because she got a call from a doctor who was treating him. So at least she knew that he was alive. Ezekiel's mom told police this, but they could not track down this particular doctor or get in contact with him, apparently. And so the case kind of went dormant for a few weeks. But then in September 2019, a few weeks after that, Ezekiel is suddenly arrested. Now, it turns out Ezekiel had been phrogging somebody's home in Honolulu for an entire week while the family was on vacation. And you're probably thinking, Hannah, that's not phrogging, that's squatting. If it's an empty or vacant home, wouldn't that be squatting? Well, keep listening, because no, not in this case. Brittany and James Campbell came home from vacation on September 20th with their two sons. Well, it was Brittany's stepsons, but James's sons. And they find a bike parked outside of their home, which was very weird. That kind of tipped them off that something was kind of off. James Campbell kind of has the family stand behind him, and he goes up to the front door and he tries to open it. But to his absolute horror, there's somebody on the other side of the door as he tries to pull it open, and this person on the other side of the door is pulling it closed. While they were like fighting to open the door, James claims that the person on the other side of the door said calmly and seriously, "This is not your house." James and Brittany spring into action. Brittany goes and calls 911 as quickly as she can, and James actually found a sledgehammer nearby, I think outside of the home, and he was holding that before he went in. They got Ezekiel out of their house and into their front yard. I don't know if police just came that fast. I have no idea how they kept Ezekiel from running away because he didn't flee. Like, they just kept him in the front yard. Maybe they were threatening him with the sledgehammer or something like that, but they managed to get him out of their house and then somehow got him arrested on the spot. Ezekiel is arrested and he pleads not guilty to a first-degree burglary charge on September 26th. The judge grants him bail, believing that he's nonviolent, and sets his bail at $5,000, which, if you don't know, in the United States, at least most states in the United States, as far as I'm aware, your bail is only 10%. So whatever the judge sets the bail at, you only have to pay 10% of that in order to get out. But because he was able to get out, that way he'd be a free man until November when he was going to go to trial. So, end of story, right? You'd think, okay, that's really creepy. Some creepy squatter, but they got him arrested. He's gone now. End of story, right? Wrong. This case gets so much creepier. And that's because of what James and Brittany found when they went back inside their home. James and Brittany's home is ripped apart. There's pots and pans everywhere. James's musical equipment strewn all over the living room. The bedroom was completely messed up. This man had not only lived in their house without their permission, but he trashed it. And it gets even worse than that. There were strange concoctions mixed together, like on the tables that they found. He was doing science experiments or something. We don't really know. But then they found knives by their computers and in their bedroom. So the couple is like, what the actual hell did he do here while we were gone? Like, our house is trashed. There's creepy stuff all over. And then it gets worse. They now find diary entries and videos on their computers that Ezekiel made while they were gone. A lot of these diary entries were titled The Omnivore Trials, a rehabilitation for rat-like people, whatever the hell that means. Then they also found notes and entries that contain details about the entire family. Like, he had written a note indicating that he knew that Brittany was on fertility treatments, and that was something that Brittany and James hadn't told anyone. This guy knew a lot about them. And then it got even worse when they found some of the notes as well as other indications that he was planning on performing surgery on this couple when they returned. The knives around the bed then took on an entirely different meaning. But some of the surgeries that he was planning to do, one thing he mentioned was a hand transplant. And then another thing kind of implied that he was going to give them quote unquote sexual reconstruction. Like while they were sleeping, I don't know. They found a video of Ezekiel on her computer that he made like with her webcam on one of her computers. And Ezekiel is sitting in her chair and he's buck naked. And then remember how I mentioned like, how is this phrogging? Isn't this just squatting? Well, the couple then realized that it is likely that this man had been stalking them for weeks leading up to their vacation, and that it's possible he was phrogging their home and staying inside their home without their knowledge. They would recall weird times when their dog would bark when there didn't seem to be anything to bark at. In the middle of the night, they recalled that one of their webcams turned on randomly without them turning it on. That detail gives me chills. I hate that. Or they'd wake up in the morning and some of their doors would be unlocked when they swear they had locked them. To be fair, we don't know for sure that it was Ezekiel doing these things. Like maybe they were just, it was confirmation bias. Maybe they were just attributing these things to this event because they were so scared now, rightfully so. but it is quite possible that he was doing these things and living in their home, or at least sneaking in and out of their home a lot and stalking and learning everything he could about this family. Like, he clearly had an obsession with his family. Needless to say, after all of this went down, the Campbells moved out of that house and even away from Honolulu. Now, this story gets worse yet again, and that seems to be the theme of today's video, is everything just keeps getting worse. Ezekiel was arrested shortly after all of this. Even though he was out on bail, he got arrested again, this time for vandalizing a Buddhist temple. So then in 2020, while in prison, even though everybody knew that he had no business being around other inmates, to no one's surprise, Ezekiel then murders his 62-year-old cellmate. His cellmate's name was Vance Grace, and Ezekiel had allegedly done this, quote unquote, without provocation. He got this charge reduced to manslaughter, but now he's serving 40 years in prison. So again, you've probably figured this out on your own by now, but it is very, very obvious that Ezekiel is not mentally well. He was definitely suffering from some mental illnesses there. You don't plan out strange human centipede-like surgeries on a family you've been allegedly stalking for months if you're totally mentally well, right? But like I said, what's so unfortunate is that everybody knew he was mentally unwell. The staff at the prison knew that he shouldn't be with other inmates, knew that he was dangerous and unstable and mentally ill, and they put him with other inmates anyway. And sure enough, like almost immediately, he killed somebody for no reason, like without them doing anything to him. What's also really, really sad is that apparently when he was living in Connecticut with his mom nearby, Ezekiel was on medications, and this medication was treating whatever mental illness he had, and he was apparently doing really well on it. Like, apparently on medication, Ezekiel was a normal person and did not have these weird paranoid stalking violent tendencies, right? But then when he went missing, he obviously went off his medication, and that's when things started going off the deep end. So again, it's not like I'm not saying that Ezekiel is not responsible for his own actions. Like, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. He's definitely responsible for his own actions. I think that in most cases that people are responsible for their own actions, because there's millions and millions of mentally ill people that never hurt a fly, you know? So it's like, what's your excuse? But I do think that this probably could have been prevented if the staff were being diligent and were either making sure and forcing Ezekiel to take the medication that kept his brain well, or they could have kept him away from other inmates. Like, I do think that they have some piece in this whole thing too, because I think James and Brittany Campbell would agree with me that he was definitely mentally ill and definitely was not in the right state of mind. I don't think if he was on medication, he would have been planning these creepy surgeries on them. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I'm also really torn on this one. Like, I do think he deserves to be punished for taking a life and for what he did for traumatizing the Campbells. But I also just hope that he gets mental health treatment. Even if maybe he deserves to be in prison, I still think he deserves to get treatment from professionals and also to be put on medication so he doesn't have to be a nuisance to not only himself but to his fellow inmates. You know what I mean? It's just wild. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Don't forget our sponsor, which is Mistplay, in the description down below. And don't forget to like the video just to support the channel. And I will see you all in the next one. Huge shout out to our newest top tier patron, who is Death Kitty. Thank you so much for joining the patron. And I will see you all in the next one. Okay, bye-bye.